It's pretty easy to get lost dreaming about the future, knowing that you have an idea for how your life is going to go, and convincing yourself that that future life is better than where you're currently at. And what if you're right? What if you would actually be happier in that hypothetical future? I guess technically speaking, at the end of the day, that's impossible to know for sure though. But what if you do happen to know that you're living on borrowed time? That the present has concerns worth acknowledging? Would you still be as happy as you were? And what if you knew that the future you were dreaming about would soon have to be reality? That it was always destined to be at the end of your path? Something you'd have to do no matter what? If all of that was true, could you still be content with the present? Happy with what you currently have, that is. Or would you be so lost in the world of what could be, what might be, entranced by your vision so much that you lose sight of what you already have? What happens then? I was out in the middle of nowhere again, and despite the weather, that could only mean one thing. I was out here to data log the car again. A third gear pull all the way to redline, a part of the tuning process, something to test this car's current state, how it's running, if it's doing okay. And while normally this would be quite routine, this time I was filled with apprehension, a fear that what we had recently done to the car would change it fundamentally, and this time, maybe not for the best. 1200cc injectors, well over 3 times the capacity of the stock ones. Why are we using these to begin with, though? After all, they're more than overkill for our stock block car. On the one hand, we're helping Motoza test out their tunes with these injectors and the TT specifically, a combo that's been quite finicky in the past. And on the other hand, it'll set us up quite nicely for that future when we do have forged internals. In the present, though, these are still risky. After all, they have a history of not playing nicely, even causing knocking in the TT specifically. So the main goal is to use my car as a guinea pig, a test subject if you will, to help Motoza iron out the quirks of this specific combo. And that's why I was so nervous about this pull. But no matter how much I was worried about this pull blowing up the car, I couldn't stop thinking about how history likes to repeat itself, and that this situation in particular was eerily similar to one that had happened not long before. Another day, another road, and yet another log. Though this was a couple days before. And the big difference? Well, this time I had no real reason to be worried. So more than anything, I was excited. I do these logs anytime I make a change to the car that requires a new tune. And at this point, I just recently upgraded the fuel pump and swapped tunes to support it. And even though the changes in this tune were minor in the grand scheme of things, this log was important because it would tell me what else needed to be upgraded in this car's fuel system to support the boost we're aiming for. After all, fuel was this car's limiting factor, and now I get to see if it still is. Just like normal, the log begins with some relatively mundane driving, all of which leads up to the true test, the third gear pull. The car not only survived the third gear pull, but it felt stronger than it was before. We wouldn't know for certain until we sent the log off to the tuner though. Sending these logs off has always been nerve-wracking, and I really don't know why. It's kind of like going to the doctor and being worried about what you could hear back, except in this case the stakes are definitely lower. But it's still pretty stressful. I mean, after all, that's how I found out that the stock turbo was blown to begin with, and look where that got me. There's no sense in avoiding it though. After all, knowing there is an issue to begin with is the best start to fixing it. This time, uploading the log wasn't that bad. The car felt like it was running better than ever, so I really didn't have too much to worry about. I did, however, know what was coming next if the car came back with a clean bill of health. We get to take the risky injectors out of the backpack and put them into the car. And I think that was really what was causing me anxiety to begin with. All the unknowns that came with that whole process. The fear of losing how good the car currently is. There's no use in worrying too much though. After all, we still have to wait and hear what the tuner says, so we might as well find some way to be productive in the meantime. Yep, that ought to work. A couple weeks ago, it looked like our spoiler extension was rather loose, and while I may have persuaded it to fully come off, I think it's worth we investigate why it actually was loose to begin with, and I'm quickly starting to realize there's a bit more to it than just the wrap failing in the cold. Sadly, I think it has to do with the car itself. Either way, I think it's best I do something about it. After all, I personally think the car looks rather naked and unbalanced without it. Kinda goofy, if you will. In my opinion, the front and side splitters kind of need that extension to match, otherwise it looks kinda empty. So even if we can't perfectly fix this, for the time being, I think it's worth trying to reattach it. So what actually failed though? I wanted to figure that out so I could hopefully prevent it from failing like that again. And at first glance, I genuinely thought the wrap had just simply cracked because it was too cold. But the closer I looked, the more I realized there might be a bigger issue at play. There was paint stuck to the wrap. Remember, this car was painted with no prep by the previous owner, so it was peeling in a number of places before we even started the wrap. In other words, the wrap failed because the paint failed, and the wing just pulled them both off. So the only way we could permanently fix this is a paint job. Sick. We can't just get the car painted right away. Not really in the budget, sadly. Plus, I don't really want to yet. I love how this wrap looks, and I'd like to make the most of it while we have it on there. So I figured I would just try and make the most of a bad situation. It lasted months on there before this was really an issue. So I figured I'd just clean the surface as best I could and reattach it. It makes no sense stepping into a second rabbit hole when I'm already knee-deep in the first one. Once the car's actually sorted power-wise, we can worry about cosmetics. And I have a feeling the peeling paint's gonna be a pretty in-depth issue. But for now, it's just gonna sit on the back burner. And this car will continue to look just as it has, with the wrap making it look way better than it actually is, hiding the real issues. No use spreading myself thin, in other words. While this is a temporary solution, it's a good one. The spoiler extension itself feels perfectly sturdy, and the look of the car is balanced again. What more could I really ask for from a distraction? After all, as good as distractions are at helping you enjoy the present, eventually, you're brought back to reality. And just as expected, the tuner says the car's running great. Which, holistically speaking, is fantastic news. But it also means that I can't put off the other upgrades, and it's time to start messing with those finicky injectors. Swapping injectors on this car isn't even a new project. I've already done this once. The car is currently running some Bosch 550cc injectors, so the only thing new this time around is the new lines in the way from the different turbo system. But when building the kit, I kept working on it in mind, so thankfully everything is up top and easy to get to. And with all this new access, I can start to remove the old injectors themselves, starting with all the electrical harnesses on each specific injector, the one sensor on the side, and then the clip for the harness itself. And once the harness is detached from the rail, we can pull the rail from the intake manifold, which is also quite easy since there's just 2 bolts holding it in place. And since this is a fuel rail, it happens to be filled with, well, fuel. So I figured whatever amount comes out when I pull these injectors is better served caught by this bucket than the engine itself. Way less messy that way. But once the clips were out, I was able to remove the injectors from the rail by simply pulling them out. And at this point, I decided to use pliers to grip them. I still have flashbacks of just how strong the gas smell was by sticking my hand wrist deep into gasoline for the fuel pump. I'd like to not repeat that. And with all the injectors removed, we can set them next to the new ones and see what the differences are. And other than the new ones flowing more than twice as much, the big difference comes with the electrical harness. On the 550s, we had to use an additional electrical bracket to get it to match up with the harness. And these 1200s won't actually need that. They'll work right away. The new injectors also came with new O-rings, which we're going to use. There's absolutely no sense in transferring the old ones over. So really, the installation process is superbly simple. Shove the injectors back into the rail, clip each of them in, and then reinstall the rail itself. Even though the injectors, the rail, and everything that attaches to it is back in place, we can't just start the car up. Unlike a fuel pump, it is absolutely necessary that we upload a new tune with these bigger injectors. The car would be running obscenely rich if we didn't. We're also definitely going to keep these 550cc injectors. I'd say the odds we could use them on a future project are rather high. And with the first version of the new software uploaded, we were ready to start the car. So far, so good. The car seemed to start up like nothing was different. Same idle vacuum, same reading from the wideband, and I couldn't hear any air leaks in the engine bay itself. Plus, I couldn't see any fuel leaking anywhere either. Maybe these injectors aren't quite as finicky as everybody has led me to believe. There's only one real way to tell that for sure, though. And And that brings me back to the present, out in the middle of nowhere, ready to go wide open throttle with injectors that have quite the reputation. There's a whole spectrum of ways this could go. They could work flawlessly, and the car could make even more power. They could also fail catastrophically and damage the engine, which I'm hoping doesn't happen. In all likelihood, what's going to happen is something between those two. All I can hope for is that it's closer to the good end. This whole time, I've been worried about enjoying the present, especially since I know what this car will be capable of when it does have forged internals. And I'm not wrong when I say that that is something to look forward to, but I think I've been looking at this entire situation the wrong way. Just because the present isn't what you want it to be, doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, or for that matter, make the most of it. I have this theory that nothing means anything unless there was a journey or a story behind it. Something you work for is going to mean a lot more to you than something that was just thrown in your lap. So the way I see it, the future will only mean something to me if I work towards it in the present. Kind of like the moments that are happening right now make up the journey towards the future you want. No matter if they're good or bad, it's part of the story. And that story is what gives the future meaning. So if I know deep down that I'm going to enjoy my dream of a future, I might as well try to stop hyperfixating on the present. I'll get where I want eventually, and I should probably just sit back and enjoy the ride. Oh yeah, and as for the car, the third gear pull, one teeny little issue. As soon as I floored it, the car hopped itself right into limp mode. Barely running, barely boosting, and barely making it home. I guess I've got a little bit more work to do. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.